Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In the Star Wars galaxy, everything is bigger. The federal government is not run at the national level or even the planetary level, it's run at the galactic level. Religions span multiple planetary systems and species, as do corporations. Now, corporations at their core are a legal entity that is designed to separate the responsibility of the company from its actual owners. It's also a great way to organize a business so that it can expand to a much larger size very quickly. And in a galaxy with limitless amounts of new markets to enter and serve, the corporations of Star Wars become truly massive. And so just like here on Earth, where you have several corporations that are more powerful than entire nations, in Star Wars, you have companies that are richer than entire planets. Now, generally, when your corporation grows to a certain size, it becomes international here on Earth, and so your consumer base becomes more diverse, and as a result, these type of companies usually hire on a more diverse group of officers to run their company so that they can figure out what exactly their consumers want. If you make a drink company that has to target the global market, you'll probably want some Chinese and Indian execs to better understand these much larger markets and make products specifically for those markets. Just like if you're running Corellian engineering, you'll probably want some Outer Rim and Hut Space executives to better understand your clientele, from the design stage to sales. But then in the decades leading up to the Clone Wars, something strange started happening. Instead of seeing these companies with very diverse leadership, you start seeing the opposite. One race would essentially take over an entire company and then only place its own species in leading positions. This is what I like to call the rise of the Ethno Corporations. In this video, we're going to be talking about 3 specific examples of what these Ethno Corporations were like, and we'll kind of follow it up with a little bit of commentary on why this occurred. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, ownersaber.com. They have an awesome new deal for you guys right now. With every purchase of a new lightsaber, you'll be getting a free lightsaber carrying case. For Padawan sabers, you'll get this black and silver case. For Master sabers, you'll get this box-like case. And for the Replica sabers, you'll get one of these black cases. So I actually have a few of these cases, and as you can tell, they're pretty sturdy. Basically, you can fit as much as 2 lightsabers in there with their hilts, along with whatever additional, stuff you have. It's pretty cool. I actually take them on my intergalactic trips when I'm visiting other planets, and the TSA usually doesn't bother me, or my lightsabers. This special starts today and ends on October 29th. In order to get the free case, use the promo code FREECASE. That's all caps. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. In 3050 BBY, the Trade Federation was started by a collection of financial, commercial, manufacturing, and trade companies. The Federation's goal was to protect the shipping lanes from the growing number of criminal and pirate entities who had followed all of the enterprising businesses to the free trade zone. The Trade Federation would serve as a neutral arbitrator for any disagreements or conflicts that rose within the ranks of the Trade Federation. It also helped organize these smaller Outer Rim companies so that they could compete against the more established corporations in the core region. But take a note here, any kind of societal structure, any kind of free market that is allowed to grow without any restraint can lead to some pretty crazy stuff. Eventually, the free trade zone's complete lack of regulations and tariffs allowed these Outer Rim companies to become ridiculously profitable. Once the basic infrastructure, communications, shipping lanes, securing those shipping lanes were established, the Outer Rim companies started dominating their individual markets and challenging core region companies. You could actually see the outflights of manufacturing and even some research and development to the Outer Rim from the core. And the Outer Rim was also growing safer by the day thanks to the increasing size of the Trade Federation's defense fleet. And so the Trade Federation would go from being this entity that watched out for the welfare of the little guy to actually being the established power in the Outer Rim. And once they established complete dominance over the free trade zone, they made sure that only Trade Federation-aligned businesses could actually operate for free. Everyone else, including smaller independent operators, had to pay ridiculous fees just to fly through their territories or use their infrastructure, which was now growing outside of the Outer Rim as well. It was basically extortion. And a lot of this has to do with one of the major factions within the Trade Federation, the Neimoidians. Now, Neimoidians do get a bad rap because most of the Neimoidians we do see are very selfish, greedy, and cowardly, all at the same time. But not all Neimoidians are actually like that. In the recent novel Star Wars Brotherhood, we do get a glimpse of larger Neimoidian society and how it's built. The Neimoidians are more or less like any other race. There's good Neimoidians, bad Neimoidians, and a lot of Neimoidians somewhere in between. But there are cultural factors that seems to make certain traits more popular in the Neimoidians than in other groups. You see, a portion of the Neimoidian life cycle still hasn't really evolved much from their insect origins. The first 7 years of a Neimoidian's life was extremely brutal as a result. Their babies, known as larvae, were placed in huge hives where there was very little food, and so only the toughest and strongest, and also usually smartest, ended up surviving. This food scarcity created a mentality of scarcity, which actually we see very commonly here on Earth in different groups that might have survived living under a totalitarian regime where economic opportunities are limited, or individuals who have survived multiple famines. And so one could say that the Neimoidians also have this famine mentality and are much more likely to be greedy and hoard supplies and materials way beyond what they actually need. It's a type of cultural trauma that every Neimoidian goes through in their most important developmental stages of life, when they're infants, basically. The positive effect of this upbringing is that the weak are weeded out completely, and those who do survive are naturally very rational and calculating individuals who do a great deal of risk assessment about every decision they make. This actually makes them perfect for an industry like shipping, where margins can be slim, and a focus on small details and procedures can create massive profits if scaled up to the right degree. While a lot of people might assume that Neimoidians are cowardly, the reality is they just see the larger, longer picture. They much rather avoid confrontation if they can find other ways of profiting. This attribute gave them excellent business minds, combined with the ruthless environment of scarcity they grew up in. It was only natural for the Neimoidian execs to want even more. Now, roughly around the same time, the Sith Lord Darth Plagueis was looking to expand the power and reach of his financial lobby known as Damask Holdings. The Sith had an eye for talent, and by talent I mean exceptionally greedy individuals who would be willing to become servants for the Sith and help destabilize the galaxy. Darth Sidious and Plagueis would use their many hidden assets to essentially assassinate the entire board of directors for the Trade Federation, and during this time period, in this vacuum of power, Nute Gunray and his faction of Neimoidians would come in and take over everything, and Nute Gunray would become the Viceroy, or main executive that leads this organization. The Neimoidians already played a huge role within the Trade Federation, but now they were in complete control. They would even replace the Trade Federation senator with Neimoidian Lot Dodd. Soon it became kind of confusing what was the Trade Federation and what was Neimoidian society. They became so intertwined with one another. The rise of Neimoidian control of the Trade Federation also saw a rise in living standards and prosperity on the Neimoidians' many purse worlds like Cato Neimoidia. But Nute Gunray's greed would ultimately lead him to allying himself with the Sith even more, which would lead to the disastrous invasion in Naboo and the even more disastrous Separatist crisis in Clone Wars. Hungry for more power and money, Gunray had been sucked into the Sith's trap and tied his people's future to the secessionist movement that was doomed to fail. And as a result, after the war, the Trade Federation would be nationalized by the Empire, and all of the Neimoidian species' holdings, all of their purse worlds, and their home planet would be occupied by the Empire, and they would be brutal to these Neimoidians. You're going to see with all the Ethno Corporations that we talk about, none of them are actually run by human beings. And that's because there's a lot of humans in the galaxy. There's no kind of threat or worry that human dominance will be supplanted by any other group. And in this way, the entire galaxy is built to be comfortable for humans, which is awesome. And so humans never feel like they need to start an Ethno Corporation to push human soft power. If anything, humans feel like they can learn a lot more from the other alien species. And so you'll see in this video, the species that choose to head towards the Ethno Corporation route have some very specific qualities. Usually they are much smaller in population, and usually they are not very trustful of other species. Take the Skakoans, for instance, native to the world of Skako. These aliens naturally lived in environments with high concentration of methane, which is why they don't typically venture off-world. And when they did, they usually had to wear a pressurized suit that made interacting with other species relatively difficult. At the same time, no one really wanted to visit the Skakoans' homeworld and do business there because, you know, it was covered in methane and no one wants to go there. Probably smelled like ass. and farts all the time. Like Uranus. That's actually not a joke. Uranus actually does smell like farts. Because of how they evolved, the Skakoans would actually rely heavily on technology. As a matter of fact, they saw technology as a natural state of evolution. As in, they saw nothing unnatural about attaching machinery to their bodies in order to survive other planets, which is also why other species tend to perceive the Skakoans as almost robotic in nature. The Skakoans would also become very xenophobic as a result to this inability to basically breathe off of their planet, and so the Skakoans would never join the Galactic Republic, and they would actually facilitate a lot of their own research and development when it comes to technology. In that way, they're not all that different from the Umbarans, who are also quite xenophobic and isolationist. They're able to develop their own technology parallel to the Galactic Republic's, and it was quite unique and sought after as a result. The Skakoans would be responsible for creating large galactic companies like Bactoid Armor Workshop, which would quickly spin off many different subsidiaries and sister companies. Quickly, Bactoid would become one of the most powerful companies not only in Skakoa, but in the galaxy. Now, around 300 years before the Clone Wars ended, a commerce guild known as the Techno Union would take over the planet of Mustafar. They would actually force the relatively primitive Mustafarians who lived on the planet to pay rent for living there. And as a result, the Techno Union would also employ these Mustafarians to work the mineral mines on the planet. The Mustafarians were well suited to the environment, making them perfect for exploitation. This was only the beginning of the expansion of the Trade Federation. They would acquire many more planets, many of them laden with resources that could be mined and exploited, and they would also take over a lot of heavy manufacturing firms. Just like the Trade Federation, the Techno Union started as this entity that was trying to create a sense of professionalism in their industry and also create a standard of norms for how companies could deal with these corporations. But you see, as Bactoid Armor Workshop grew in size, its executive Wat Tambor unlocked access to crazy amounts of capital and began an aggressive hostile takeover of the Techno Union and its many holdings. Wat Tambor would eventually move the headquarters of the Techno Union to Skako Minor, forcing all of the different diverse companies and their officers to adapt to Skakoan conditions. Now, Wat Tambor had closely followed the rise of the Trade Federation, which started as this entity that was designed to protect small businesses, which turned into a large mega conglomerate that even had representation within the Galactic Senate. The Trade Federation was allowed to directly lobby other senators for new pro-business legislation. They were able to even push forward their own business-friendly legislation. And technically, the Trade Federation had another vote because the Nemoidians also had their own seat in the Senate. Wat Tambor would also seek membership successfully in the Galactic Senate for the Techno Union, and just like how the Trade Federation had cornered the entire transport industry, the Techno Union had cornered the entire manufacturing industry. Wat Tambor would soon control so much manufacturing that during the Clone Wars, the Techno Union was allowed to remain neutral in the conflict, despite the fact that it clearly was selling and equipping both military forces. As a matter of fact, most of the Separatist Alliance's droids and ships, along with most of the vehicles and starships used by the Republic, along with most of the small arms used by both sides, were designed and manufactured by the Techno Union. Without them, the war would have been impossible. But just like Newt Gunray, Wat Tambor would fly too close to the sun and he would be burned by his success. The Muun are known for their intelligence and impressive mathematical capabilities. Their dramatic appearance, which involved elongated skulls and lanky limbs, only reinforced this inhuman impression of them. Hailing from the world of Scipio, throughout the centuries in a competitive galactic market, the Muun proved to be some of the best bankers in the galaxy and developed a reputation for being extremely trustworthy and good with credits. And eventually, the collection of Muun banks on Scipio would combine its resources and lending power and turn into the Intergalactic Banking Clan. Now, the Republic, if you haven't noticed, has a pretty free market-oriented economy. One could say that it's less regulated than any economy here on Earth, even America's. But that could also be due to the sheer size of the galaxy and territory the Republic was ruling over. But anyway, one of the things that the Republic had no control over was their own currency. At one point in time, the Republic currency was actually tied to the Erodium standard, which was kind of like the gold standard. It was a precious metal that everyone in the galaxy agreed was worth something. But once the Erodium standard was removed from the Galactic Credit. The Republic realized that it had to form an alliance with the Intergalactic banking clan, the largest network of banks in the galaxy, to keep a credit reserve to make sure that the currency could be trusted and allow the Republic economy to survive even when there is a serious economic crisis or recession. I guess in the same way, the Republic just trusted the Jedi to be guardians of the galaxy. They trusted the Mune's rational thinking and mathematical abilities to be the guardians of the Galactic Credit. Now, everything was pretty much fine because the Mune were very honest and rational as far as how they handled their credits. That was until one organization known as Damas Holdings got heavily involved with the Sith. You see, Damas Holdings was run by Darth Plagueis, and he started placing his own people within the IGBC because Damas Holdings had many contacts with that corporation. This involved placing San Hill in a position of power in the IGBC, which allowed the Sith to control the bank's actions during the Clone Wars. You see, the Intergalactic banking clan during the Clone Wars, just like the Trade Federation and Techno Union, played both sides of the war. But unlike the Trade Federation and Techno Union, the only problem is that the Trade Federation and Techno Union usually receive payments before they exchange their goods or services, where the IGBC's main way of making money was either holding business assets, which were getting destroyed by the war, or loaning money out to individuals and making money off of the interest they collected. Usually these loans are only given out with great scrutiny and care, especially when the Mune banks who's letting these loans out are also in control of the stability of the currency. It's probably a conflict of interest, actually. But when political interests force banks to make loans against the banker's better judgment, it can lead to some pretty big problems. For instance, the IGBC would make loans to both sides of the Clone Wars, which might seem like double profits, but the reality is one side in a war usually loses, and sometimes they lose everything and default on all their loans as well. And as the Clone Wars started winding down, it was very clear that the IGBC was heading towards insolvency. Not only had many of its business holdings been destroyed and depreciated in value, a lot of the loans the Separatist Alliance had held, they were defaulting on, and that was a big problem. The IGBC was running out of money. So yeah, the bank that guaranteed the credit reserve that backed the Galactic Credit was almost bankrupt. This, of course, gives Palpatine the right and political support to do what? Well, take over the banking system and also control the currency. You know, Palpatine and Plagueis were brilliant. They understood the Republic economy better than most of these CEOs and founders did. As Sith, they understood greed and fear better than most, and they used their understanding of people to basically take over the entire Republic economy and political system. Instead of waging war on the Republic's mighty free market and populace, they decided to corrupt all the checks and balances that kept the system functioning. Any organization, whether it's the Senate or a corporate board, suffers when too much power is consolidated beneath one individual. Even if they prove to be very competent or have some racial trait that makes them better at doing their job, completely removing any opposition or challenge to their authority will only make them dumber and more complacent. Newt Gunray, Watson Borsan Hill, and even Palpatine would operate in an echo chamber. And when leaders, both in fiction and in real life, operate in an echo chamber for a long period of time, they start making really dumb mistakes. They become detached from reality. The Trade Federation, Techno Union, and IGBC were in extreme positions of dominance, and all they really needed to do was to maintain the course they had been on for many years, create the right investments, and they could have lasted for another 1,000 years. But Palpatine had much greater plans. He understood that a company with one vision, or better yet, one species in control of that company, helps create a hierarchical structure that is much easier to control from the top. This means a singular culture and strategy that made it much easier for the Empire to harvest these companies and add it to its growing portfolio of state-controlled businesses. These Ethno Corporations essentially did all the hard work and helped gather all the resources for Palpatine to eventually use. I mean, more diverse companies like Ethno Corporation, which encouraged its designers and engineers to think outside the box, were much harder to nationalize. During the takeover of Incom, most of the intellectual property and talent actually left the company for the Rebel Alliance as a result of the Imperial takeover. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video about Ethno Corporations. I hope you learned a little bit about why it's important to have diversity, not only in politics, but also in corporate environments. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.